I arrived 20 minutes early, just like I always did, as I set 2 bags of groceries on Daniel's kitchen counter. I heard him laughing in the next room. Then he said the words that shattered my heart more than losing my husband ever had. Mom's only useful because she watches the kids for free. I stood there frozen, gripping the grocery bag until my fingers hurt. I smiled when I walked in, pretending I'd heard nothing. But on the drive home, one truth became impossible to ignore. If my own son believed I was only useful, then today would be the last day I ever gave away my life for free. If you've ever loved someone who slowly stopped appreciating your kindness, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If stories like mine remind you that your feelings matter too, I'd be grateful if you liked this video and subscribed. You never know whose story might help you feel a little less alone. My name is Jean Matthews. I turned 67 3 months before my life changed in a way I never expected. Most people would describe me as quiet, dependable, and maybe a little old-fashioned. I suppose that's true. I spent 40 years believing that if you loved your family enough, everything else would work itself out. For most of my life, it actually did. My husband Robert used to tell me, kindness is one of the few things that never loses its value. He believed that with all his heart. Robert and I were married for 38 wonderful years. We met when I was 22 and working part-time at our local public library while finishing college. He had stopped in looking for a repair manual for an old pickup truck. Instead of finding the book, he found me. He liked telling everyone that story. I always rolled my eyes whenever he did. "You only married me because I finally found that manual," I would tease. He would grin and kiss my forehead. "No," he'd say. "I married you because you smiled at a stranger like he'd been your friend for years." That was Robert. He noticed little things. Together, we built a simple life in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. We weren't wealthy. We didn't travel the world. We didn't own expensive cars. But we raised our son Daniel in a home filled with laughter. Sunday dinners, birthday traditions, Christmas cookie baking, and the belief that family always showed up for one another. Daniel was a sweet boy. As a child, he followed Robert everywhere. If Robert fixed the fence, Daniel held the nails. If Robert washed the car, Daniel sprayed more water on himself than the truck. If Robert grilled hamburgers, Daniel insisted on wearing his own tiny apron. Watching the two of them together made me believe I'd done something right. Daniel hugged often. He said thank you without being reminded. Every Mother's Day, he made homemade cards that I still keep in a cedar chest upstairs. One of them simply read, "Mom, you're my favorite person." I cried when I first read it. Sometimes I still do. After high school, Daniel attended Ohio State, earned a business degree, and landed an entry-level job with a financial consulting firm. Robert was so proud. "I don't care how much money he makes," he told me one evening while we sat on the back porch. "I just hope he stays kind." At the time, I couldn't imagine that ever changing. Then life reminded us that nothing stays the same forever. Robert was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to goodbye, we had only 11 months. 11 months. People tell you to cherish every moment. The truth is, when someone you love is dying, every moment hurts. Robert tried to protect me until the very end. He still joked with the nurses. He still apologized whenever I stayed overnight in the hospital. One evening, he squeezed my hand. "Promise me something." I nodded before he even finished. "When I'm gone, don't stop living just because I have." I promised him. I meant every word. After Robert passed away, the house became painfully quiet. No more humming while making coffee. No more baseball games playing too loudly on television. No more footsteps coming down the hallway every morning. Grief isn't loud. It's silent. It's reaching for someone who isn't there. It's setting 2 dinner plates before remembering you only need one. Daniel visited often during those first months. He checked on me, fixed little things around the house, changed light bulbs, mowed my lawn. He worried about me, and I loved him even more for it. A couple of years later, he married Lauren. She was intelligent, ambitious, organized, and confident. She worked in marketing and had a personality completely opposite mine. Where I hesitated, Lauren decided. Where I apologized, Lauren expected. We weren't especially close, but we got along. At least I thought we did. Then came the happiest news imaginable. Their daughter, Olivia, was born. Holding her for the first time felt strangely familiar. I remembered holding Daniel exactly the same way. 2 years later, Ethan arrived. Suddenly, my quiet house felt alive again. Tiny shoes by the door, crayons on my kitchen table, children laughing in my backyard. Those sounds healed pieces of my heart I didn't know were still broken. By then, I had officially retired after spending 36 years as an elementary school librarian. I loved those children almost as much as they loved story time. When retirement came, everyone asked what exciting adventures I had planned. Travel, painting, book clubs, volunteer work, gardening. I smiled and said I'd figure it out. Then Daniel called. "Mom," he said, "would you mind helping with Olivia once or twice a week? Daycare is expensive." I didn't even let him finish. Of course. I meant it. Helping my family wasn't a burden. It felt like a privilege. At first, everything seemed balanced. Mondays and Wednesdays, a few hours at a time, sometimes Friday afternoon. Lauren always thanked me. Daniel hugged me before leaving. The kids were delighted every time I arrived. I baked cookies, read books, built blanket forts, watched cartoons. Everything felt joyful. Then, without anyone ever announcing it, things began changing. Monday became Monday and Tuesday. Then Wednesday was added. Soon, Daniel called asking if I could handle school drop-offs because an early meeting had come up. A week later, Lauren needed me for afternoon pickups. Then came teacher work days, then sick days, then date nights, then overnight stays, then entire weekends. No one ever sat me down and asked if I was comfortable with all of it. The requests simply kept coming, and I kept saying yes. Whenever my church friends invited me to lunch, I'd answer the same way. "I'm sorry. I'm watching the grandchildren." When my gardening club planned a weekend trip, I declined. "I'm needed." A former coworker asked whether I'd volunteer at the library one afternoon each week. I wish I could. I even canceled a reunion with college friends because Daniel needed me for 3 extra days after Lauren's business conference was extended. I never complained, not once, because every sacrifice seemed worthwhile when Olivia wrapped her little arms around my neck and whispered, "Grandma, I'm so happy you're here." How could anyone say no to that? Years passed almost without me noticing. My own calendar slowly stopped belonging to me. Before making any plans, I found myself thinking the same question. What if Daniel needs me? That became my schedule. Not retirement, not hobbies, not friendships, just availability. The strangest part wasn't how much I gave. It was how normal it all started to feel. Daniel no longer asked carefully. He assumed. Lauren no longer checked whether I was free. She checked what time I'd arrive. Somewhere along the way, gratitude quietly disappeared. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Just little by little. Like paint fading under years of sunlight. One afternoon, I realized something that stopped me cold. I couldn't remember the last conversation Daniel and I had that wasn't about babysitting. He didn't ask how I was sleeping. He didn't ask whether my arthritis was bothering me. He didn't ask if I was lonely. He asked if I could come Tuesday or Thursday or all weekend. Standing alone in my kitchen that evening, I looked around the quiet house Robert and I had built together. I remembered his final promise. Don't stop living. Without even realizing it, I had broken that promise. Not because anyone forced me to. Because I loved my family so much that I slowly disappeared inside their lives. And somehow, none of us noticed until it was almost too late. People often ask when everything changed. I wish I had a clear answer. I wish I could point to one argument, one holiday, or one terrible conversation and say that was the moment. But that's not how it happened. Respect rarely disappears overnight. It fades so slowly that you don't realize it's gone until one day you find yourself wondering why your own life no longer feels like yours. The first change was Daniel's messages. They used to sound like this. Hi, Mom. Would you be willing to watch Olivia Thursday afternoon if you're busy? We can figure something else out. Then they became shorter. Need you Thursday. Eventually, they weren't even questions anymore. Picking up the kids at 3. No, please. No, thank you. Just instructions. At first, I laughed it off. He's busy, I told myself. He doesn't mean anything by it. I defended him before anyone even criticized him. Lauren was different. She wasn't rude exactly. She simply assumed I would always be available. One Tuesday morning, my phone rang while I was watering flowers in the backyard. Jean, she said, without even saying hello. Our sitter canceled. I'll drop Ethan off in 20 minutes. Before I could answer, she added, You're home anyway. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone. I hadn't agreed. She hadn't asked. 20 minutes later, Ethan was standing on my porch, holding his dinosaur backpack while Lauren hurried back to her SUV. Love you, she called through the window before driving away. I smiled for Ethan. But something inside me felt different. Not angry, just invisible. Little things kept happening. Daniel would text that he'd be back by 5. 5 became 6. 6 became 7:30. One evening, it was nearly 9 before he arrived. I had already fed both children, helped Olivia finish her homework, bathed Ethan, read 3 bedtime stories, and tucked them into bed. Daniel walked through my front door carrying a takeout coffee. Sorry, he said casually. Traffic. I looked outside. The roads had been clear all evening. He didn't notice. He kissed the children goodnight, picked up Ethan, held Olivia's hand, then turned toward the door. I'll see you Wednesday. Not thank you. Not I'm sorry. Just I'll see you Wednesday. After the door closed, I stood alone in my quiet living room. The toys were still scattered across the carpet. Juice cups sat on my coffee table. Cookie crumbs covered the couch cushions. I cleaned everything before going to bed. No one expected me to. I simply couldn't leave the mess. Another afternoon, Lauren arrived almost an hour late. She stepped inside while talking on her Bluetooth headset. She waved at me without ending her business call. Olivia ran to hug her mother. Lauren hugged her back with one arm while continuing her conversation about marketing budgets. After hanging up, she looked around my kitchen. Oh, she smiled. You made dinner. I nodded. I wasn't sure when you'd get here. Perfect, she said. That saves me from cooking tonight. She packed up the leftovers I'd made. Chicken casserole, green beans, fresh rolls, enough food that I'd planned to eat for 2 more days. She thanked me for dinner. Not for spending 11 hours with her children. Just dinner. I watched her drive away carrying my casserole dish. Then I made myself a peanut butter sandwich because my refrigerator was nearly empty. I laughed at the absurdity of it. Sometimes laughter is easier than crying. My church friends noticed I disappeared. Nancy called one Saturday morning. We're driving to Hocking Hills next weekend. Come with us. I almost said yes. I wanted to go. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. Need the kids overnight next Friday. I hesitated. Nancy smiled. Tell him no. The word felt foreign. No, I couldn't even imagine saying it. I'm sorry, I whispered. I already have plans. Nancy looked at me gently. No, Jean. You don't. They have plans. Her words stayed with me all weekend. I wanted to disagree. Instead, I couldn't. The children never made me feel taken for granted. Never. Olivia loved helping me bake. She insisted chocolate chips belonged in almost everything. One afternoon, she asked if we could bake banana bread. Halfway through mixing the batter, she looked at me. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. Do you ever get tired? I smiled. A little. She frowned. You yawn a lot. Children notice everything. They keep me busy. She thought for a moment before nodding. I like when you're here. So do I. That part was true. Then Ethan wandered into the kitchen, carrying 2 toy trucks. He looked up with complete innocence. Grandma? What is it, buddy? When do you get weekends? I laughed softly. What do you mean? Daddy gets weekends. Mommy gets weekends. When's your weekend? I didn't know how to answer. He waited. Finally, I kissed the top of his head. I guess today is my weekend. He accepted the answer. Children believe what adults tell them, even when adults aren't telling the truth. Weeks later, another small moment cut deeper than it should have. Daniel called while I was grocery shopping. I need you tomorrow. I have a doctor's appointment. What time? 10. Okay. I'll drop the kids off at noon. I waited. I thought he might ask how the appointment went. Instead, see you tomorrow. Click. The next day, my doctor told me my arthritis was getting worse. Nothing serious. Just something to monitor. I drove home wishing Robert were sitting beside me. Daniel never asked about the appointment. I never told him. There didn't seem to be room in his schedule for conversations that weren't about childcare. Lauren often said the same sentence. You know you're retired anyway. She meant it as reassurance. But every time she said it, I felt something twist inside me. Retired didn't mean my time had no value. It didn't mean my calendar belonged to everyone else. It didn't mean my life had ended. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Olivia and I were building a puzzle while Ethan napped upstairs. She suddenly giggled. What? She looked embarrassed. Nothing. Tell me. Daddy says you're impossible. I blinked. Impossible. She nodded. But he was laughing. What exactly did he say? She concentrated, trying to remember. He told Mommy not to worry because Grandma always says yes. She smiled. So we're lucky. She had no idea what those words meant. She thought it was a compliment. I forced myself to smile back. We are lucky. She returned to the puzzle. I stared at the tiny cardboard pieces without seeing them. Grandma always says yes. That wasn't gratitude. That was certainty. Certainty that I would rearrange my life, cancel my plans, ignore my own needs, simply because no one believed I would ever choose myself. That night, after the children went home, I wandered through my empty house. Robert's favorite chair still sat by the fireplace. His reading glasses remained on the bookshelf exactly where I'd left them years ago. I sat in his chair, closed my eyes, and imagined what he would say. He wouldn't tell me to stop loving our family. He would never ask that. But I knew exactly what he would remind me. Kindness without respect eventually becomes expectation. And expectation can quietly erase the person who keeps saying yes. After Olivia told me that Daniel always joked about Grandma saying yes, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The words followed me everywhere, while I folded laundry, while I watered my roses, even while I sat in church on Sunday morning, listening to a sermon about gratitude. Grandma always says yes. It sounded harmless, almost funny, but hidden inside those 4 words was something much heavier. No one worried whether I wanted to help anymore. They simply assumed I would. 3 days later came the conversation that changed everything. The conversation you heard at the beginning of my story. I still remember every detail. The weather was unusually warm for early September. I stopped at the grocery store before heading to Daniel's house. I bought fresh strawberries because Olivia loved them. Chocolate milk because Ethan insisted mine tasted better than the one at home. And a peach pie. Daniel always loved peach pie. Some habits survive even after your heart begins to break. I arrived 20 minutes early. My spare key still worked. I carried the grocery bags through the kitchen door. As I set them on the counter, I heard Daniel laughing somewhere down the hallway. He was in his home office. The door wasn't completely closed. I wasn't trying to listen. I simply froze when I heard my name. Daniel said between laughs. We'd never pay for childcare. There was a pause. Then he said the sentence that changed my life. Mom's only useful because she watches the kids for free. Silence. Then more laughter. His laughter. I don't remember breathing. The grocery bag slipped from my hand. An apple rolled across the kitchen floor. I stood perfectly still, praying he hadn't heard it. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might give me away. He continued talking. I mean, she's retired. What else is she going to do? I couldn't hear the person on the other end of the call. Only Daniel. Only my son. The little boy who once wrote that I was his favorite person. I wanted to walk out. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask him when I had become something useful instead of someone he loved. Instead, I picked up the apple, took one slow breath, walked into the living room. A few seconds later, Daniel stepped out of his office. Hey, Mom. He smiled, the same smile he'd worn his entire life. He kissed my cheek. You're early. I stopped for groceries. Great. He didn't notice my voice shaking. Lauren came downstairs carrying her laptop bag. Morning, Jean. She kissed Ethan goodbye. Olivia ran over and hugged me around my waist. Grandma, we're making cookies today, right? I smiled. if that's what you'd like. For the rest of the afternoon, I acted exactly the way I always had. I played board games, helped with homework, read Ethan his favorite dinosaur book, laughed when Olivia beat me at checkers. No one knew my heart had cracked wide open, not even the children. Especially not the children. When Daniel returned that evening, he thanked me for dinner. Then asked the same question he always asked. Same time Thursday. I looked at him. Really looked. His face seemed so familiar, yet somehow I couldn't recognize the man standing in front of me. I smiled anyway. We'll see. He barely noticed the answer. He simply nodded. Okay. Then he left. The drive home felt longer than usual. I turned the radio off after only a few minutes. Silence hurt less. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in the car, hands still gripping the steering wheel. The sun was setting behind the maple trees Robert planted 20 years earlier. I remembered sitting beside him in that very driveway after Daniel's high school graduation. Robert had smiled proudly. We did our job. Back then, I believed we had. Now I wasn't so sure. Eventually, I walked inside. The house felt strangely empty. I took my shoes off, made a cup of tea, then wandered upstairs. Without thinking, I opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were decades of memories. Robert's military photographs, old Christmas ornaments, family vacation pictures, and dozens of handmade cards Daniel had given me growing up. I picked one at random. Construction paper, blue crayon, crooked letters. I love you, Mom. Another. Thanks for always helping me. Another. Best mom ever. One card from middle school caught my attention. Inside, Daniel had written, I hope one day I'm half as kind as you. The tears finally came. Not loud sobbing, just quiet tears rolling down my face. I sat on the bedroom floor for almost an hour, looking at those cards, wondering where that little boy had gone. People think heartbreak always arrives with shouting. Sometimes heartbreak whispers. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you've loved your entire life. Around midnight, I walked downstairs and opened the drawer where I kept old planners and calendars. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I wanted to convince myself I hadn't imagined how much I had given. I spread everything across the dining room table. Appointment books, pocket calendars, school schedules, old text messages, doctor reminders. Every page held little notes. Watch Olivia. Pick up Ethan. Sleepover. Teacher conference. Lauren business trip. Daniel out of town. Hour after hour. Week after week. Year after year. I found myself grabbing a yellow legal pad. Without planning to, I started writing. Monday, 8 hours. Tuesday, 5 hours. Weekend, 36 hours. Holiday, 10 hours. I kept going. One notebook became 2, then 3. By 2 o'clock in the morning, my dining room table looked like an accountant's office. I wasn't trying to calculate money. I was trying to understand my own life. How much of it had quietly become someone else's responsibility. The next morning, I continued. I searched average childcare rates in Ohio, hourly care, before-school care, after-school care, summer programs, weekend babysitters. I used the lowest numbers I could find. I didn't want to exaggerate. I multiplied, added, checked my math. then checked it again. The final number made me stare at the calculator. $158,400. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I recalculated. 156,000. Again, 157,000. Every calculation landed in the same place. Over $150,000. I leaned back in my chair. It wasn't the money. Not really. If Daniel had asked me for every dollar, I would have given it to him. What hurt wasn't the value. What hurt was realizing that something worth over $150,000 had somehow become worthless in his eyes simply because it came from me. I looked around the empty dining room, the legal pads, the calendars, the faded planners. Then I said something out loud that I had avoided admitting for years. This is partly my fault. The words sounded harsh, but they were true. Daniel hadn't forced me to say yes. Lauren hadn't chained me to their schedule. I had chosen it. Again, and again, and again. Every time I ignored my own plans. Every time I accepted another last-minute request. Every time I convinced myself love meant never disappointing anyone. I had slowly taught them a dangerous lesson. That my time didn't matter. That my life could always wait. That I would always choose them over myself. And because I had taught them that lesson for 8 years, they finally believed it. As painful as Daniel's words were, for the first time, I understood something even more important. If I wanted my family to respect my boundaries, I would have to create them first. The first time I said no, my hands were shaking. It sounds strange, doesn't it? A 67-year-old woman afraid of a single word. But when you've spent years making yourself available to everyone else, saying no feels like breaking something important, even if that something is slowly breaking you. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I had just finished watering my plants when my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name for a few seconds before answering. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded normal, relaxed, like nothing had changed. Hi, Daniel. I need you this weekend. Not hello, not how are you, just need. I took a slow breath. I'm not available this weekend. Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then he laughed, a short, confused laugh. Okay, seriously? I'm not available. Another pause, this one longer. What do you mean you're not available? His tone shifted slightly, not angry yet, just puzzled. I have plans. What plans? The question came too quickly, too automatically, as if my life required explanation. I hesitated, then answered honestly. I'm going to lunch with friends on Saturday. And Sunday, I have church, and I'm meeting someone afterward. He exhaled sharply. Mom, we really need you this weekend. I understand, but I'm not available. That was the moment everything changed. I could feel it, like a crack running through something we had both taken for granted. Are you serious right now? His voice was sharper now. I am. It's just one weekend. It's never just one weekend, Daniel. He didn't respond immediately. Then I heard something else. Lauren's voice in the background. What did she say? Daniel covered the phone slightly, but I could still hear him. She says she's busy. There was a brief silence. Then Lauren spoke louder. Jean, this is really inconvenient. She didn't even take the phone, just spoke through him. I closed my eyes for a second. I'm sorry it's inconvenient, but I already have plans. Lauren sighed loudly. Can't you move them? The question landed exactly the way it always had before. Like it was obvious. Like my plans were optional. For the first time in years, I didn't adjust. No. Another silence. Then Daniel spoke again. We're counting on you. Those words used to soften me, used to make me feel needed, important. Now they felt heavy, like pressure. I understand. But I'm not available. Lauren's voice came through again, more frustrated this time. This is what family does, Jean. Family helps each other. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not even hurt. Clarity. I have helped for a very long time. Daniel let out a breath. Mom, why are you making this difficult? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so familiar. Because for years I had made everything easy. For them, not for me. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm simply not available. There was a pause long enough that I wondered if they would hang up. Instead, Daniel spoke quietly. So, what are we supposed to do? It was the first honest question he had asked. I answered just as honestly. You'll figure it out. He didn't like that answer. I could hear it in his voice. We don't have time to figure it out. I'm sorry. You're really doing this? That question felt different, less about the weekend, more about something bigger. Yes. Lauren muttered something I couldn't quite make out. Daniel spoke again, this time more distant. Fine. We'll handle it. I know you will. Another pause. Then he said something that stung more than I expected. I just didn't think you'd be like this. Like this? As if choosing myself made me someone unrecognizable. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I think you just never saw this side of me before. He didn't respond. The call ended a few seconds later. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone long after the line went quiet. My heart was racing, not from fear, from something else. Relief. That surprised me. I expected guilt, regret. Instead, I felt lighter, like I had been holding my breath for years without realizing it, and I had finally exhaled. The rest of that day felt strange. Quiet. Unfamiliar. I kept waiting for the phone to ring again, for Daniel to call back, for Lauren to text. Nothing. By evening, I realized something important. For the first time in years, no one needed me. And instead of feeling empty, I felt free. Saturday morning, I woke up without an alarm. No early drop-offs, no packed lunches, no rushed routines. Just silence. Peaceful silence. I met Nancy and two other friends at a small cafe downtown. They were already seated when I arrived. Nancy smiled when she saw me. You made it. I did. She studied my face. You look different. I laughed. I said no. Her smile widened. Good. We spent 3 hours talking. Really talking. Not about schedules or responsibilities. About books. About travel. About life. At one point, I realized something almost embarrassing. I had forgotten how to enjoy a conversation that wasn't interrupted every 10 minutes. When I returned home that afternoon, my phone was filled with missed calls. Daniel, Lauren, even an unknown number. I listened to one voicemail. "Mom, call me back." No anger, just urgency. I didn't call right away, not out of spite, because for the first time, I understood something clearly. Their emergency didn't have to become mine. Sunday evening, Daniel finally reached me again. His voice sounded tired. "We had to hire a sitter." "I'm glad you found someone." "It cost us $300. There was something in his tone, like he expected me to react, to apologize. I didn't. "Childcare is expensive." He exhaled. "We had to cancel dinner Saturday." "I'm sorry to hear that." Another pause, then quietly. "This is going to be a problem." I thought about everything I had done for the past 8 years. All the weekends, all the nights, all the sacrifices. Then I answered calmly, "It doesn't have to be." "Then what do you want, Mom?" The question hung between us. Simple, direct. For the first time in years, I answered honestly. "I want to be asked. I want to be respected. And I want my time to matter too." Silence filled the line. Not the confused silence from before. This one felt heavier, more uncomfortable, like he didn't know what to say. Finally, he spoke. "We'll talk about this later." Okay, but something told me this conversation was only the beginning. The silence came first. Not the peaceful kind I had felt that Saturday morning. This silence was different. Heavy, intentional. Daniel didn't call again that week. No quick texts asking for help. No last-minute schedule changes. Nothing. At first, I told myself it was temporary. He's busy, I thought. He's figuring things out. But by the second week, the truth became harder to ignore. He wasn't busy. He was pulling away. Lauren didn't call either. No messages, no updates, no photos of the kids. Even the group chat we had used for years suddenly went quiet. It was as if I had stepped out of their routine and they had decided to continue without me. The hardest part wasn't losing the requests. It was losing the connection. For years, I had been part of their daily lives. School mornings, bedtime stories, little conversations over snacks. Now nothing. One afternoon, I found myself staring at my phone longer than I care to admit, waiting for a message that never came. That evening, I sat in my living room holding one of Ethan's toy trucks he had accidentally left behind weeks earlier. I turned it over in my hands, listening to the silence in the house. I missed them. More than I had expected, more than I wanted to admit. People assume setting boundaries feels powerful, and it does. But no one talks about the loneliness that can follow. The space you create also creates distance, and sometimes that distance hurts. 3 weeks passed. Then one night, my tablet chimed. A video call. Unknown device. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the name. Olivia. My heart jumped. I answered immediately. Her face appeared on the screen. Eyes wide, hair messy. "Grandma?" "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded unsure, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to call. "I missed you." My chest tightened. "I missed you too." Ethan suddenly appeared beside her, pushing into the camera. "Grandma?" He smiled like nothing had changed. Children don't hold grudges. They just feel absence. Hi, buddy. Olivia looked over her shoulder before speaking again. Mom and Dad don't know I'm calling. I kept my voice calm. Okay. They said you're busy now. There was something in her tone, confusion, not accusation. I chose my words carefully. I've just been doing some things for myself. Did we do something wrong? That question hit harder than anything Daniel had said. I shook my head immediately. No. Never. You didn't do anything wrong. Ethan frowned. Then why don't you come anymore? I smiled gently. I still want to see you. I just can't be there every day like before. Olivia looked down for a moment, then back at me. I liked it when you were there. I liked it too. She hesitated, then whispered, Daddy gets mad when I ask about you. That told me everything I needed to know. Daniel wasn't just distant. He was controlling the narrative. I kept my voice steady. Your dad loves you. And he's just figuring things out. Olivia nodded slowly. She didn't fully understand, but she accepted it. Children trust the adults in their lives to make sense of things, even when those adults are struggling themselves. We talked for a few more minutes, about school, about her art project, about Ethan's obsession with dinosaurs. Then she said something that stayed with me long after the call ended. I hope you come back. I smiled. I'll always be here. After the call ended, I sat in silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Not entirely. There was still a connection, even if it had changed. The next morning, I made a decision. If my life was going to feel full again, I had to rebuild it. Not wait for someone else to invite me back into theirs. So I started small. I called Nancy. Are you still going to the garden club meetings? She laughed. Every Thursday. Would you mind if I joined again? Jean, we've been waiting for you. That sentence warmed something inside me. Waiting for you. Not expecting, not assuming, just waiting. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the community center for the first time in over a year. The room smelled like soil and fresh flowers. Women I hadn't seen in months looked up and smiled. Jean, look who's back. No judgment, no questions, just warmth. I sat down, picked up a small pot, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere that didn't depend on what I could give. Over the next few weeks, I kept going. Church on Sundays, garden club on Thursdays, lunch with friends when I wanted, not when I was available. I even signed up to volunteer at the public library again. The same one where I had worked for 36 years. On my first day back, I walked through those familiar doors and felt something shift. This place didn't need me to sacrifice myself. It welcomed me as I was. A woman named Carol, who had replaced me after I retired, smiled warmly. We've missed you. I smiled back. I've missed this too. She handed me a stack of children's books. Storytime starts in 15 minutes. I laughed softly. Some things never change. As I sat in front of a group of children reading aloud, I realized something important. I still had a life. I still had purpose. It just wasn't tied to being available for Daniel anymore. And slowly, that truth began to feel less painful and more freeing. But no matter how full my days became, There was still one space that never quite filled, the space where my grandchildren used to be. And I couldn't help but wonder how long Daniel planned to keep them there. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, one of those quiet days that had started to feel normal again. I had just finished shelving books at the library when I decided to stop by a small cafe a few blocks away. It wasn't planned. I just didn't feel like going straight home. The place was half empty, soft music playing, the smell of coffee and cinnamon in the air. I ordered tea and sat near the window. For a few minutes, I just watched people walk by. Simple moments like that used to feel like a luxury. Now they felt earned. Jean. I looked up. Standing a few feet away was a man I hadn't seen in years. Mark Reynolds, Daniel's college friend. They had been inseparable once. Football games, study groups, late-night pizza runs. Mark smiled. I almost didn't recognize you. I laughed lightly. I hope that's a good thing. It is, he said. You look happy. That word caught me off guard. Happy. I hadn't thought about myself that way in a long time. Mind if I sit? Of course. We talked for a few minutes about small things. The weather, the neighborhood, how long it had been. Then, like most conversations connected to my past, it turned to Daniel. How's he doing? Mark asked. Hessings, the weather, the neighborhood, how long it had been. Then, like most conversations connected to my past, it turned to Daniel. How's he doing? Mark asked. He's busy. Mark nodded. Yeah, that sounds like him. He took a sip of his coffee. I don't know how he does it, honestly. Does what? Balancing everything? Work kid's life. He always says he just pushes through. I felt something tighten in my chest. What do you mean? Mark leaned back in his chair. Daniel talks about it all the time. How he built everything from the ground up. How he never had help. How he just worked harder than everyone else. I didn't say anything. Mark continued. I mean, the guy's impressive. 3 promotions in 5 years. That's not normal. My hands went still around my teacup. 3 promotions. Mark looked surprised. You didn't know? I shook my head slowly. He never mentioned it. Mark frowned slightly. Really? Yeah. There was a brief pause, then he shrugged. Well, he's doing really well. Got a big bonus last year, too. New clients, bigger responsibilities. He's kind of the example they point to now. Example. I let that word settle. Example of what Mark smiled. He always says it's just discipline. No shortcuts. No relying on anyone. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like a door closing. I looked down at my hands. For years, I had rearranged my entire life so Daniel could focus on his career. School pickups, doctor appointments, sick days, late nights, weekends, everything that allowed him to stay late at the office. Everything that allowed him to travel. Everything that allowed him to say yes to opportunities. And now he was telling people he did it alone. Mark didn't notice the change in my expression. He kept talking. I remember when Olivia was born. I thought for sure he'd slow down. But he didn't miss a beat. He said he had everything under control. I forced a small smile. He always was determined. That's one way to put it, Mark said with a laugh. Then he leaned forward slightly. So, you still watching the kids every day? The question landed differently now. Not heavy, not painful, clear. No, I said calmly. Mark blinked. No, I stopped. When? A few weeks ago. He looked genuinely surprised. Wow. That must have been a big adjustment for them. I imagine it was. He shook his head slightly. I don't know how he's managing now. He always made it sound like everything just worked. Worked. That word echoed in my mind. Yes, everything had worked, because someone else had been working quietly in the background. Me. I took a slow sip of my tea. Mark hesitated before speaking again. I hope you don't mind me saying this. Go ahead. I always thought it was incredible how involved you were. You were basically raising those kids too. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Thank you. I mean it, he continued. Not everyone shows up like that. And I know Daniel. He wouldn't have been able to do everything without that support. I nodded slowly. For the first time in that conversation, I felt seen. Not by my son, not by Lauren, but by someone who had simply observed from the outside. And that realization brought something unexpected. Not anger, not even sadness, perspective. Mark finished his coffee and stood up. It was really good seeing you, Jean. You too, he smiled. Tell Daniel I said hi. I will. But as I watched him walk away, I knew something had changed. Not just in my relationship with Daniel, in how I saw it. For years, I had told myself I was helping, that I was part of something bigger, that we were a team. But now, I understood something I hadn't fully allowed myself to see before. I had been invisible in his story, not forgotten, removed, rewritten, and that hurt. But it also clarified something important. If someone can erase your contribution that easily, then they never truly understood its value. I finished my tea and sat there for a while longer, watching the world move outside that window. People walking, cars passing, life continuing. Then I thought about something Robert used to say. Character isn't what people say about you. It's what they choose to remember. Daniel had chosen what to remember and what to leave out. But for the first time, I realized something that gave me unexpected strength. I didn't need to be part of his version of the story anymore, because I finally understood my own. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. No pressure, no expensive gifts, just family food and the quiet comfort of being together. That year, it felt different before it even began. I almost didn't go. I stood in my kitchen that morning, staring at the casserole I had prepared the night before. Green bean casserole. Daniel's favorite. Some habits are hard to break. I told myself I didn't have to attend. No one had asked me to bring anything. No one had checked if I was coming. But then I thought about Olivia, about Ethan, and I picked up my coat. Daniel's house looked the same porch, the same front door, the same faint sound of children running inside. But when I rang the bell, something inside me felt unfamiliar. Lauren opened the door. Oh, Jean. Not hi, not, I'm glad you're here. Just surprise. I brought something, I said, holding up the dish. She stepped aside. Come in. The house was full. Family members. Daniel's sister, Karen. A few cousins. Even Mark was there. Voices filled the room, laughter, conversation. But when I walked in, it shifted slightly. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Mom. Daniel walked over, gave me a quick hug. Glad you made it. Made it. As if I had been uncertain. As if I hadn't been coming to this same house for years. I smiled. Of course. The children saw me next. Grandma! Olivia ran straight into my arms. Ethan followed, nearly knocking into both of us. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Warm, real, the way it used to be. I missed you, Olivia whispered. I missed you too, Lauren called from the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready. I carried my casserole inside and set it on the counter. Lauren glanced at it. Oh, you didn't have to bring anything. I nodded. I wanted to. She didn't respond, just turned back to the oven. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, then stepped away. Dinner was served half an hour later. Everyone gathered around the table. Plates filled, glasses poured. Conversation resumed. At first, it was easy. Safe topics. Weather, work, school. Karen asked Olivia about her classes. Mark told a story about a client meeting gone wrong. Laughter circled the table. I stayed quiet, listening, observing. Then somewhere between the turkey and dessert, Daniel said it. He leaned back in his chair, smiling casually. Well, Mom's officially retired from babysitting. A few people chuckled, light laughter, nothing harsh, nothing cruel, but something about the way he said it made it feel like a joke I hadn't agreed to. I looked up, met his eyes. He was still smiling, like it was harmless, like it was funny. That was the moment I made a choice. Not to stay quiet, not this time. I set my fork down carefully. I suppose that depends on how you define retirement. The table went quiet, not completely silent, but enough. Daniel's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? My voice stayed calm, steady. I mean, I spent the last 8 years helping raise your children. No anger, no accusation, just truth. Lauren shifted slightly in her chair. Daniel laughed again, softer this time. Mom, come on. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt him. I simply continued. I picked them up from school. Watched them when they were sick. Took care of them overnight. Canceled my plans. Adjusted my schedule. Again and again. The room was very quiet now. No one was laughing anymore. I didn't mind doing those things, I added. I loved doing them. I looked at Olivia, then Ethan. They were both watching me closely. But love doesn't make something invisible. Daniel's expression changed. Not angry, not yet. Uncomfortable. Mom, this isn't really... I spoke gently. I gave thousands of hours, years of my life, and I never asked for anything in return. Lauren looked down at her plate. Daniel's jaw tightened. I didn't realize that made me useful. The word hung in the air, heavy, clear, unavoidable. Mark shifted in his seat. Karen looked at Daniel, then at me. Then she spoke, quietly. She's right. Everyone turned to her. Karen didn't hesitate. You practically raised those kids, Mom? Daniel exhaled sharply. That's not... Karen cut him off. It is. I saw it. You were at work. Lauren was at work. Mom was there. Silence. Real silence this time. Daniel looked around the table, as if searching for support. finding none. "This is ridiculous," he said finally, his voice sharper now. "We're really doing this at Thanksgiving." I met his eyes, still calm, still steady. "No, you started it." Lauren stood up suddenly. "I think we should clear the table." No one moved. The moment had already happened. "It couldn't be undone." Daniel pushed his chair back slightly. "So, what, you want credit?" There it was. The misunderstanding. The deflection. I shook my head. "I wanted respect." Another silence. Then I added softly, "There's a difference." Daniel didn't respond. He just looked away. The rest of dinner continued. But not really. Conversations restarted. Voices filled the space again. But something had shifted. Truth has a way of doing that. When I stood to leave later that evening, Olivia hugged me tightly. "Are you coming back soon?" I smiled gently. "I'll always come back." Ethan hugged my leg. "Don't go for so long again." I kissed the top of his head. "I'll see you soon." Daniel walked me to the door. We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking. Finally, he said quietly, "You didn't have to do that." I looked at him, really looked. "I think I did." He didn't argue, didn't apologize, just nodded once, then opened the door. And for the first time, I walked away knowing he had heard me. Whether he understood me, that was something else entirely. The call came 3 days after Thanksgiving. I wasn't expecting it. Not from Daniel, not after the way we had left things. I was sitting at my kitchen table reading through a new novel from the library when my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I answered. "Hi, Daniel." There was no greeting on his end, no pause, just tension. "Olivia got suspended from school today." The words landed hard. "What happened?" "She got into a fight." I sat up straighter. "Olivia." "Yes, Olivia." His voice carried frustration and something else. Stress. "She's never done anything like that before." "What happened?" I asked again, softer this time. He exhaled sharply. "Some girl said something." "What kind of something?" There was a pause. Then reluctantly, "She said Olivia doesn't have a real grandma anymore." My chest tightened. "Why would she say that?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Then he muttered, "Because Olivia told her you stopped coming around." Silence filled the space between us. I closed my eyes for a moment, not out of guilt, out of understanding. Children don't hide things. They tell their truth exactly the way they feel it. "What happened next?" I asked gently. "Olivia shoved her. Then the other girl shoved back. It escalated." I could picture it clearly. Olivia's face, her stubborn chin, her protective heart. "Is she okay?" "She's fine." "But she's suspended for 2 days." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "And what did she say about it?" Another pause. "She said the girl was lying." "She said her grandma didn't leave." "She said her grandma was just busy." That word again. Busy. It had become a shield, a simplified explanation for something much more complicated. "Daniel," I said quietly, "she's confused." "I know." His voice softened slightly. I know. His voice softened slightly. I just didn't think it would affect her like this. I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been forming since the call began. Why are you telling me this? Silence. Longer this time. Then, I just didn't think it would affect her like this. I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been forming since the call began. Why are you telling me this? Silence. Longer this time. Then, because she asked for you. That answer hit differently. Not defensive, not distant, honest. She wants to come over. I took a slow breath. This was the moment, the one I had been preparing for without realizing it. Not just about seeing Olivia, but about what came with it. Okay, I said, but we need to talk first. Daniel hesitated. About what? About expectations. His tone shifted again, guarded. What expectations? I'm not going back to the way things were. Silence. Then I didn't ask you to. No, I said calmly. But if Olivia comes over, we need to be clear about what that means. Another pause. What does it mean? It means I'm her grandmother. Not full-time childcare. I'll spend time with her. I'll support her. But I won't take over responsibilities that belong to you and Lauren. He didn't respond right away. I could hear him thinking, weighing. Finally, that's fair. The words surprised me, not because they were unreasonable, because he said them, without argument, without resistance. Then she can come over tomorrow, I said. After school. I'll bring her. The next day felt different, not like the past, not like routine, intentional. When Olivia walked through my front door, she didn't run. She didn't laugh. She walked slowly. Then she looked up at me, and her eyes filled with tears. I didn't leave you, I said immediately. She dropped her backpack and ran into my arms. I know, she whispered, but her voice shook. I held her tightly for a long time, long enough for her to settle, for her breathing to slow, for the tension in her shoulders to soften. I missed you, she said. I missed you too. We sat on the couch afterward. Ethan wasn't with her, just Olivia, just the two of us. I got in trouble, she said quietly. I heard. I didn't mean to push her. I believe you. She looked down at her hands. She said you didn't want to see us anymore. I gently lifted her chin so she would look at me. That's not true. Then why aren't you here all the time? There it was, the question every child asks in the simplest way. I chose my words carefully. Because I needed to take care of myself, too. She frowned. But you always took care of us. Yes. And I still will. Just not all the time. She thought about that. I don't like it. I smiled softly. I understand. She leaned against me. Are you mad at Daddy? The question surprised me. I considered it, then answered honestly. No, I'm not mad. Then why don't you come? I exhaled slowly. Because sometimes people need to learn how to treat each other better. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway. Children accept emotional truths even when they don't grasp the details. We spent the rest of the afternoon baking cookies, talking, laughing, slowly finding our rhythm again. Different, but real. When Daniel came to pick her up that evening, he stood in the doorway longer than usual, watching, observing. I could see it in his eyes. He was noticing the difference. Not just in Olivia, in me. "She seems better," he said quietly. She needed reassurance. He nodded, then hesitated. "Mom." I waited. "I didn't realize how much she depended on you." I met his gaze. "She didn't depend on me. She loved me." There was a difference, and for the first time, I think he understood it. After that afternoon with Olivia, something shifted again. Not just in her, in Daniel. He didn't say much that day when he picked her up, but I could see it. The way he watched us, the way he hesitated before leaving, the way his voice softened just slightly. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was something. And sometimes, something is where change begins. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. Olivia came over twice. Planned visits. Not last minute, not assumed. Daniel would text ahead of time. "Is Thursday okay? Would you be free Saturday afternoon?" The wording mattered. He was asking now, not telling, and every time I answered honestly, sometimes yes, sometimes no. The first time I said no again, I waited for the tension, for the frustration. But it didn't come. "Okay," he replied. "Maybe next week." Simple, respectful. It felt new. Ethan came with Olivia the third time. The moment he walked in, he ran straight into my arms, like nothing had changed. "Grandma?" I laughed. "Hi, buddy." "I brought my dinosaurs." Of course he did. Some things don't change, and I was grateful for that. But not everything was as easy as it seemed, because underneath the small improvements, there was still something unspoken, something unfinished. And it came to the surface one evening. Daniel had come inside to pick the kids up. Lauren stayed in the car. That alone told me something. He lingered in the kitchen after Olivia and Ethan went outside, hands in his pockets, looking at nothing in particular. Finally, he spoke. "I talked to Mark." I leaned slightly against the counter. "About what?" "He told me you ran into him. At the calf." "Yes." Daniel nodded slowly. "He said I made it sound like I did everything on my own." There it was. The truth spoken out loud. Not by me, by him. I didn't rush to respond. I let the silence sit. Sometimes people need space to hear their own words. "I didn't realize I was doing that," he continued. His voice was quieter now, less defensive, more thoughtful. "I guess I just got used to thinking of it that way." I looked at him, not angry, not accusing, just present. "That happens." He exhaled. "I didn't mean to erase you." Erase, that was the word. Not useful, not busy. Erase. "I know," I said, and I meant it, because the truth is, people don't always realize what they're doing until someone stops quietly accepting it. Daniel leaned against the counter across from me. "I've been thinking about what you said at Thanksgiving." I waited. "You said you wanted respect." "Yes." He nodded. "I didn't think I was disrespecting you." "I know." "But you were." He didn't argue, didn't interrupt, just listened. I think I just saw you as part of the system. The phrasing made me pause. System? He nodded. Like everything else in my life. Work. Schedule. Childcare. It all just worked. And I didn't question it. There it was again. Worked. I had been part of something that worked, but not something that was valued. I didn't think about what it cost you, he added. I appreciated that he said it, even if it came late, even if it took distance to make him see it. Most people don't, I said gently. Not until they have to replace it. He gave a small, tired smile. Yeah. Turns out childcare is expensive. We both knew he wasn't just talking about money. There was a pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. I was angry when you said no. I figured. I thought you were punishing us. I shook my head. I wasn't. I was protecting myself. He nodded slowly. I see that now. That sentence mattered, more than an apology, because it showed understanding. And understanding is what leads to change, not guilt, not obligation. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, he said after a moment. I wouldn't want them to. Good. He looked at me then, really looked. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Not rushed, not forced, real. I didn't respond immediately, not because I was holding on to resentment, because I wanted to feel the moment fully. I accept that, I said finally. And I did. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry the hurt forward. Daniel nodded, relief flickering across his face. I want the kids to have you in their lives. They always will. But in a way that's healthy. I smiled slightly. I think we're already getting there. He looked toward the door where Olivia's voice echoed faintly from outside. I missed this, he admitted. Missed what? Not just you watching the kids. Just being able to come here, without everything feeling automatic. I understood what he meant. When something becomes expected, it loses its meaning. When it's chosen, it becomes valuable again. I missed it too, I said. We stood there for a moment longer. No tension, no pressure, just quiet understanding. Then he picked up his keys. I'll see you next week. Maybe, I replied. He smiled. Maybe. And that one word felt more respectful than every I need you he had ever said. The real test didn't come with Daniel. It came with Lauren. Up until that point, she had stayed distant, polite when necessary, quiet when present, but never fully engaged, and I understood why. For years, our relationship had been built on convenience. I made her life easier. She accepted it. No questions, no conversations. Now that I had stepped back, that dynamic no longer existed. And neither did the illusion that everything was fine. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from church and was setting a kettle on the stove when my phone rang. Lauren. I stared at her name longer than I had Daniel's. Then I answered. Hello, Lauren. Her voice came through calm but tight. Hi, Jean. There was a pause, not awkward, measured. I was wondering if you had a few minutes to talk. Of course. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I think we should clear the air. I leaned slightly against the counter. I agree. Silence stretched for a second. Then she began. I'll be honest. I've been frustrated. I appreciated the honesty. It makes sense. You stopped helping without much warning. There it was. Her version of the story. I didn't interrupt. I had to rearrange my work schedule. We had to hire sitters. It's been stressful. Her voice didn't sound angry, just controlled, like she had practiced what she wanted to say. I understand that, I replied. And I'm sorry it's been difficult. She hesitated. I don't think you do. That caught my attention. Then help me understand. Another pause, longer this time. Then, I built my career around the fact that you were there. The words were clear, direct, and honest. I took on projects I wouldn't have taken otherwise. I traveled when I needed to. I stayed late when I had deadlines, because I knew the kids were taken care of. She exhaled slowly, and then suddenly that changed. I let her finish. Let her say everything she needed to say. I'm not saying you didn't have the right to stop, she added quickly. But it felt like everything just shifted overnight. Now it was my turn. I understand why it felt that way. Because from your perspective, it did. I paused, then continued. But from mine, it didn't. She didn't respond, so I went on. I spent years saying yes. Years adjusting my life around yours and Daniel's. Years making sure things worked. I used her word deliberately. Worked. And I never complained. I never set limits. I never asked for anything in return. Lauren's voice softened slightly. I know. That question wasn't sharp. It was honest. She didn't answer right away. I probably didn't think about it as much as I should have. That was the closest she had come to acknowledgement. I didn't either, I said gently. For a long time. I thought I was just helping. I thought that's what being a good mother, a good grandmother, meant. And then something changed. What? She asked quietly. I took a breath. I realized I had made myself invisible. Silence. Real silence. I became something you could rely on, but not something you needed to respect. Lauren inhaled slowly. I never meant to disrespect you. I believe you. But impact matters more than intention. That sentence lingered between us, not as an accusation, as truth. She spoke again more carefully now. So what does this look like going forward? A good question. A necessary one. It looks like balance. It looks like communication. It looks like asking, not assuming. She was quiet for a moment. And if we need help, you ask. And if you're not available, then I'm not available. There was no hesitation in my voice, no apology, just clarity. Lauren exhaled. I think I'm still adjusting to that. I understand. Another pause. Then she said something that surprised me. I didn't realize how much pressure you were under. I nodded slightly. Neither did I. I just kept going. Because it was easier than stopping. Lauren let out a small breath. I think I did the same thing. That caught my attention. How I kept taking on more work, more responsibility, because I knew you were there. And I never stopped to think about what that meant for you. There it was, the connection, not blame, not defensiveness, understanding. I'm not asking you to go back to how things were, she said after a moment, but I do want us to find a way to work together. I smiled slightly. I think we already are. She didn't respond immediately. Then, thank you for being honest. Thank you for listening. Another pause. Then her voice softened in a way I hadn't heard before. The kids really missed you. I missed them too. I think we all needed to figure some things out. I think so too. Before she hung up, she added one more thing. I'm glad you said something at Thanksgiving. That surprised me, even if it was uncomfortable. Especially because it was uncomfortable. After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, thinking, reflecting, not on what had been said, on what had been understood. For the first time, Lauren hadn't seen me as a resource, or a backup plan, or part of a system that worked. She had seen me as a person, and that changed everything. Not overnight, not completely, but enough. Enough to build something new, something healthier, something honest. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt like we weren't just adjusting to change. We were finally understanding it. I thought things had settled. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to breathe again. Enough to feel like we were building something healthier. Then December came, and with it, Christmas. If Thanksgiving had cracked things open, Christmas would test whether anything had truly changed. The invitation came from Lauren, not Daniel, a short text. We're hosting Christmas this year. We'd like you to come. I read it twice, not because it was confusing, because it was careful. We'd like you to come. Not you're coming. Not be here at noon. Just an invitation. I replied simply, I'd like that. But something in me stayed cautious. Because holidays don't just bring people together. They bring expectations, memories, old habits, and I wasn't sure yet which version of our family would show up. Christmas morning, I took my time getting ready. No rushing, no preparing multiple dishes, no packing overnight bags. Just one gift for each grandchild, and a pie. Because I wanted to bring something. Not because I felt obligated to. That difference mattered. When I arrived, the house felt warmer than Thanksgiving, quieter, more intentional. The kids opened the door before I even rang the bell. Grandma, Ethan nearly tackled me. Olivia hugged me tightly. You came. I said I would. Lauren appeared behind them, smiling. Not forced, not polite. Genuine. Merry Christmas, Jean. Merry Christmas. Daniel came from the living room. Merry Christmas, Mom. His voice was steady, comfortable. We hugged. Not quick, not distant, normal. And for a moment, it felt like we had found our footing again. Presents were already stacked under the tree. Music played softly in the background. The kind of scene that used to feel automatic. Now it felt earned. We sat together as the kids opened their gifts. Olivia carefully unwrapped each one. Ethan tore into his like it was a race. I laughed. Some things really don't change. When Olivia opened my gift, a small art set, her face lit up. You remembered? Of course I did. She hugged me tightly. Daniel watched that moment. I saw it. The way his expression softened. The way he noticed something he might have overlooked before. Connection. Real connection. Not convenience. Not routine. Something chosen. Later, while the kids played, Lauren joined me in the kitchen. She handed me a cup of coffee. "I'm glad you came. I'm glad you invited me." She nodded. "I meant what I said the other day. About working together." "I know." She leaned against the counter. "I've been trying to do things differently." "In what way?" "I've been asking for help instead of assuming it. And when you're not available, I make other arrangements." I smiled slightly. "That sounds healthy." She laughed softly. "It's also expensive." We both smiled at that, but then her expression grew more thoughtful. "I think I understand something now." "What's that?" "I wasn't just relying on you. I was depending on you in a way that wasn't fair." I appreciated the honesty. "That's an important realization." She nodded. "And I don't want to go back to that." "Neither do I." We stood there for a moment, comfortable, not tense, not careful, just real. Then Daniel walked in. "Hey, can I borrow Mom for a second?" Lauren stepped aside. "Of course." He led me into the living room, away from the noise, away from everyone else. There was something in his expression, serious, but not tense. "I've been thinking about something," he said. I waited. "About everything you did for us." "And how I talked about it." I stayed quiet, let him find his words. "I told people I did it on my own." I told myself that too. He shook his head slightly. "I think I needed to believe that." "Why?" "Because if I didn't, I'd have to admit I was relying on you more than I should have." There it was. Not just acknowledgement, accountability. "I think a lot of people do that," I said gently. He nodded. "But that doesn't make it right." "No." He looked at me. "Mark told me something that stuck with me." "What?" He said the strongest people are the ones who admit they didn't do it alone. I smiled slightly. "That's true." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I don't want to erase you from my story anymore." Those words mattered. More than an apology. More than a correction. They were a choice. "I appreciate that." He nodded, then added something unexpected. "I told Lauren we should set a schedule." "I told Lauren we should set a schedule." "Not for you. For us." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "What kind of schedule?" "A real one." "For childcare." "For work." "For everything." "So we don't fall back into, not for you, for us." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "What kind of schedule?" "A real one." "For childcare." "For work." "For everything." "So we don't fall back into old patterns." That surprised me. Not because it was unreasonable, because it was responsible. "I think that's a good idea." He smiled faintly. "Me too." There was a pause. Then he said quietly, "You deserved better." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw not just my son, but a man learning something difficult. "I think we're getting there," I said. He nodded. "I think so too." When I left that evening, something felt different. Not perfect, not complete, but solid, like we had crossed something invisible. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking away feeling needed. I was walking away feeling respected. And that made all this difference. I didn't expect the setback. After Christmas, I thought we had reached something stable. Not perfect, but steady. Respectful. Then life reminded me something important. Growth isn't linear. It loops. It tests you again. Sometimes harder than before. It started with a phone call from Daniel late one evening. His voice was different, tight, urgent. "Mom, can you help tomorrow?" I paused. Not because I couldn't, because of how he asked. Not rude, but not the same either. "What do you need?" "Lauren has a work emergency. I've got a deadline." The sitter canceled. There it was, the old pattern. Everything stacking at once. And me being the solution. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I asked calmly, "What time?" "All day." That answer told me everything. Not a visit, not a few hours. All day. Like before. Like nothing had changed. I took a slow breath. "I can come for a few hours in the afternoon." Silence. Then, "I kind of need the whole day." Of course he did, because that's what he was used to. "I understand," I said, "but I'm not available for the whole day." His tone shifted slightly. "Mom, it's just this once." That sentence, I had heard it before, many times, and every time, just once, became routine. "I can help in the afternoon," I repeated. "That's what I can offer." Another silence, longer this time, frustration building on his side. "I don't know what we're supposed to do then." I didn't rush to fix it, didn't fill the gap, didn't step in, because that was the point. "You'll figure it out," I said gently. That wasn't dismissal. It was belief. He didn't see it that way. "Okay," he said shortly. "I'll figure something out." The call ended, and for a moment, I felt the old guilt creeping in. The familiar pull, the instinct to call back and say, "Fine, I'll come." But I didn't, because I had already lived that version of myself. And I knew where it led. The next day, I kept my schedule. Library in the morning. Lunch with Nancy. Then in the afternoon, I went to Daniel's house as promised. When I walked in, the tension was immediate. Not loud, but present. Lauren was in the kitchen, on her laptop, focused. Daniel was pacing. The kids were in the living room, restless. "Hey," I said calmly. Daniel nodded. "Hey." No smile, no warmth, just stress. "I'm here for the afternoon." "Yeah." His tone was clipped. I didn't react. I went straight to the kids. "Who wants to bake cookies?" Ethan jumped up immediately. "Me," Olivia followed. "Can we do chocolate chips?" "Of course." We moved into the kitchen, started mixing ingredients. The simple rhythm of baking filled the space. Flour, sugar, eggs, normal, steady, and slowly. The tension eased, at least around the kids. But Daniel stayed distant. Lauren stayed quiet. When the cookies were in the oven, Olivia looked up at me. "Are you staying all day?" I shook my head gently. "Just for a little while." Her face fell slightly. "But it's okay," I added. "We're going to make the most of this time." She nodded, trying to accept it, Children adapt faster than adults, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Later, while the kids were occupied, Daniel pulled me aside. I had to cancel a meeting this morning, he said. His tone carried frustration. I'm sorry to hear that. He crossed his arms. If you had just come earlier. I stopped him gently. Daniel. He paused. You asked. I answered. I didn't leave you without help. I told you what I could do. He looked at me, still frustrated. But it wasn't enough. There it was. The truth. Not cruel, just honest. I nodded. I understand that. But that doesn't change what I can give. He exhaled sharply. You don't get it. No, I said calmly. I do. I just don't agree. Silence. Tension. The old dynamic trying to reassert itself. But something was different this time. I wasn't stepping into it. I used to rearrange everything for you, I continued. I don't do that anymore. He looked away, jaw tight. I thought things were better between us. They are. Then why does this feel like a step back? Because you're asking for something I'm not willing to give. He didn't respond, and that was the moment I realized something important. Growth doesn't mean no conflict. It means different conflict, healthier conflict, clearer conflict. Lauren spoke from behind us. Daniel? Her voice was calm. He turned. We talked about this, she said. He frowned. Talked about what? Not relying on your mom like that. He didn't respond. She stepped closer. We had a plan. We said we wouldn't go back to old patterns. Her voice wasn't accusatory, just firm. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I know. Then act like it. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't just me holding the boundary. Lauren was too. And that changed everything. Daniel looked at both of us, then exhaled. You're right. The words came out reluctantly, but they came. I'm just stressed. I know, Lauren said, but this isn't the solution anymore. He nodded slowly, then looked at me. I'm sorry. I didn't rush to reassure him, didn't dismiss it. I simply said, I know, and I meant it, because this wasn't about perfection. It was about awareness, and awareness takes time. When I left later that day, the house felt different. Not tense, not resolved, but honest. And as I walked to my car, I realized something that surprised me. The setback didn't feel like failure. It felt like proof. Proof that things had changed enough to be tested and strong enough to hold. A year later, my life looked nothing like it used to. And yet, in many ways, it felt more like mine than it ever had before. I woke up without alarms. I made coffee slowly, sat by the window, and watched the morning light move across the yard Robert and I had built together. For the first time in years. There was no quiet voice in the back of my mind asking, what if they need me today? Because now, if they did, they would ask. And that changed everything. My weeks had rhythm again. Not someone else's rhythm. Mine. Mondays at the library. Tuesdays for errands and quiet afternoons. Thursdays at the garden club. Sundays at church. And in between, space. Space to think, to rest, to exist. I had started traveling too. Nothing extravagant. Just small trips with friends. A weekend by the lake. A short visit to see Nancy's sister out of state. Simple things. But they mattered. Because they were chosen. Not squeezed into the leftover time no one else had claimed. Daniel's family was still part of my life, but differently. Healthier. More intentional. He called one evening. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, Daniel." "I wanted to check, are you free Saturday afternoon?" I smiled slightly. "What for?" "We're thinking of going to a movie. Thought maybe you'd like to come." That still surprised me. Not because it was unusual now. Because of what it meant. I wasn't the default plan. I was included in the plan. "I'd like that," I said. "Great. And if you're not feeling up to it, that's okay too," he added. That part mattered just as much. Choice. Respect. We met at the theater that Saturday. Lauren was already there with the kids. She waved when she saw me. "Jean." No hesitation, no formality, just warmth. "Hi." Ethan ran up to me holding a bag of popcorn. "I got extra butter." "I can tell." I laughed. Olivia hugged me. "Grandma, you're sitting next to me." "Of course I am." Daniel handed me my ticket. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you for inviting me." We walked in together. Not as a routine, not as an obligation, as a family. After the movie, we went out for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a small restaurant nearby. We talked, not about schedules, not about responsibilities, about life. Olivia's school project, Ethan's latest dinosaur obsession, Lauren's new campaign at work, Daniel's upcoming presentation, and then about me. "How's the library going?" Daniel asked. "Good," I said. "I read to a group of second graders this week. They were very opinionated about which book I should choose." Lauren laughed. "I can imagine." "It's nice being back," I added. "I missed it." Daniel nodded. "I'm glad you're doing things you enjoy." That sentence would have been impossible a year ago. Not because he didn't care, because he never thought about it. Now he did. Lauren spoke next. "We were actually talking about planning a trip this summer. Nothing big, just a week somewhere." She glanced at Daniel. "We were thinking maybe we'd coordinate schedules early." "So everything's clear." I smiled. "That sounds like a good plan." Daniel added, "We'll figure out childcare ahead of time." No last-minute chaos. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "That sounds organized." He laughed. "We're learning." That was the truth. We all were. Later that evening, we went back to their house. The kids ran into the backyard. Daniel joined them, throwing a ball with Ethan, Olivia chasing after it. Lauren and I stood on the porch, watching. "They're happier," she said quietly. "They are." "So are you." I glanced at her. "Yes." She nodded. "I think we all are." We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I used to think stability meant everything running smoothly." She paused. "But now I think it means everyone knowing where they stand." I smiled. "That's a better definition." She looked out at the yard. "Thank you for not walking away completely." I considered that, because there had been moments when I almost did. "I didn't want to lose my family," I said. "I just needed to find myself again." She nodded. "I understand that now." Inside, I heard Ethan laughing loudly. Daniel's voice followed. "Careful!" Olivia shouted something back. The kind of noise that fills a house with life, but no longer filled me with responsibility. just joy. Later, when I was getting ready to leave, Olivia walked me to the door. Grandma. Yes, sweetheart. Are you coming next weekend? I smiled. What's next weekend? Nothing yet. I laughed softly. Then we'll see. She nodded, satisfied, because now she understood something she didn't before. That love doesn't disappear when it's not constant. That presence doesn't have to mean availability every moment. That relationships can change and still be strong. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The hurt, the silence, the conflict, the conversations, the changes. And one simple truth became clear. Saying no hadn't broken my family. It had saved it. It didn't end with a big moment. No dramatic speech. No final confrontation. Just something quieter, stronger, real. It was a Tuesday afternoon when it happened. Nothing special. No holiday, no event. Just an ordinary day. I was in my backyard, trimming the roses Robert had planted years ago. The same roses I used to rush past because I didn't have time. Now I took my time, carefully cutting back each stem, letting the sun warm my face, letting myself just be. That's when I heard the gate open. Grandma? Olivia's voice. I turned. She was standing there with Ethan, backpacks still on, Daniel behind them. Hi, I said, surprised. Hi, Mom, Daniel replied. We were in the neighborhood. I smiled slightly. That's new? He laughed. Yeah, it is. The kids ran toward me. Ethan wrapped his arms around my waist. Olivia hugged me tighter than usual. We finished school early, she said. Teacher meeting. And we thought maybe we could visit. Not ask, not expect, just visit. I'd like that, I said. We sat outside. No rush, no plan, just conversation. Ethan showed me a drawing he had made. A dinosaur. Of course. Olivia talked about a book she was reading. Daniel sat quietly for a while, watching, not checking his phone, not distracted, present. After a few minutes, he spoke. You look happy. I smiled. I am. He nodded. I can see that. There was no jealousy in his voice, no discomfort, just recognition. That mattered. We talked about small things, everyday things. Nothing heavy, nothing dramatic, and yet it felt more meaningful than any big conversation we had before. Because it wasn't forced. It wasn't fixing anything. It was just living. At one point, Ethan looked up at me. Grandma, are you busy today? I paused, then smiled. Not today. He grinned. Good. Because now, when he asked that question, it actually meant something. Later, Daniel stood up. We should probably head out soon. No pressure, no expectation that I would say, stay longer, or, it'll come with you. Just a statement, a choice. Olivia looked at me. Can we come again this weekend? I tilted my head slightly. What do you think? She smiled. I think you'll say yes. I laughed. Maybe. And that word again. Maybe. It had become part of our language, not uncertainty. Freedom. Daniel walked with me toward the gate. The kids ran ahead, laughing, arguing over something I didn't quite catch. He stopped, looked at me. I've been thinking about something. What's that? He hesitated. then said quietly, I used to think being needed meant being important. I listened. But now I think being respected matters more. I smiled softly. It does. He nodded. I wish I had understood that sooner. I shook my head gently. You understand it now. That's what matters. He looked out toward the kids. I don't want them to grow up thinking people exist to serve them. Then you're already doing better, I said. He exhaled, relieved. I'm trying. I know. There was a pause. Then he added, Thank you for not letting me stay the same. That sentence stayed with me because it wasn't about what I gave him. It was about what I refused to keep giving. Sometimes love isn't about what you do. It's about what you stop doing. After they left, I stood in the yard for a long time, listening to the quiet. Not empty, peaceful. And I thought about everything. The moment he called me useful, the silence that followed, the guilt, the distance, the conversations, the change. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. I didn't lose my role in my family. I redefined it, from obligation to choice, from expectation to respect, from being needed to being valued. And that difference changed everything. Because in the end, I didn't stop loving my family. I just stopped forgetting myself. Sometimes the hardest thing to do in a family isn't giving more. It's knowing when to stop giving in ways that hurt you. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice without limits. That being a good mother, a good grandmother, meant always saying yes, always being available, always putting everyone else first. But what I learned is this. When you give without boundaries, people don't always see your love. They see your availability, and over time, that becomes something they expect, not something they appreciate. Setting boundaries didn't break my family. It showed them who I really was. A person, not a role, not a system, not something that just worked. And once they saw that, everything changed. Not overnight, not easily, but honestly. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were only valued for what you could do for others? Have you ever struggled to say no, even when you knew you needed to? If you have, I'd really like to hear your story. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that your time, your energy, and your life matter too, please like this video and subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself.